officially welcome to our webinar this afternoon. It's really good to see you. So glad that you could join us. We're going to be doing our third webinar in the series that we've been following, Leading in Uncertain Times. My name is Pam McNaughton and I have been working with CPS for the last 7 years. My particular area of responsibility is helping lay people and clergy in multi-parish benefices, so one vicar, lots of churches, to do mission really well. If you don't know about CPAS, Church Pastoral Aid Society, we're an Anglican mission organisation focused in the UK and Ireland, and we have 3 areas of responsibility. Helping leaders to lead their churches well, training them. We are patrons for around 670 churches. That means we match new leaders for churches with vicars who are available, and we also run holidays for children and young people. If you want to know more about what we do, please look at the CPAS website. We're going to continue on our focus on leading in uncertain times, and today we're thinking particularly about leading with courage. After we've had some input, we'll go into breakout rooms for discussion and then come back for some Q&A. On the chat, at the head of the chat, there is a link to our handout if you haven't yet printed it out from the link that we sent you in the email. Just a note that we don't send out afterwards a record of the chat. So if there are things that come up that you want to note down as you go through, that would be a really good thing. So without further ado, let me introduce today's speaker. James, would you like to say a bit about yourself?
Yes, hi, good morning, good afternoon, isn't it now, everyone? Lovely to see you. Really looking forward to spending this hour with you as we think about this theme of leading with courage.
So James, why is it that we are looking at this topic today rather than thinking about what would seem more obvious, which is Christmas?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I have to say, we've thought very hard about what to do in this particular webinar. And of course, Advent and Christmas are what's on our immediate horizon and what many of us are giving our time and attention to. But there were 2 reasons why we chose the topic. Firstly, there is a lot of stuff around for Advent and Christmas, and plenty of other people are offering really helpful material on that. And indeed, if at the end you want to stay on for an extra few minutes, we will offer you top 5 tips that we've got on Christmas. But because lots of others are doing that, we felt we had the freedom to maybe focus on something a little different. And what we've chosen to focus on is a slightly longer term view because of where we are in this COVID situation. And so we're thinking about what might we need to do in terms of our leadership with regard to the reconstruction phase that comes at around the New Year time. And so we just want to highlight 1 or 2 things and talk about the place of courage in all of that when there are some exciting possibilities to grapple with and also some challenges to face.
Thank you so much, James. Why don't we pray together for our time? Some well-known verses from Lamentations chapter 3. The steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. His mercies never come to an end. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. The Lord is my portion, says my soul. Therefore I will hope in him. Loving God, thank you for your great faithfulness. Thank you for your endless mercies. As we gather today, fill us again with your Holy Spirit and restore in us your hope. Open our hearts and minds to all you long to teach us. In the lovely name of Jesus we pray. Amen.
Amen.
So, James, over to you for some input. Everybody else, do listen. If you want to post questions and comments in the chat, that would be great too. James.
Great, thank you so much, Pam. So what I want to do is 2 things. I want to think about where are we at now and offer just a few reflections on what that might look like. And then I want to take a few moments to think about what it might mean to lead with courage and how might we best go about that. And see what that might look like. We sent out a handout. Hope that will be helpful to you. Do have that alongside you as we reflect and think about this particular issue. Let me offer you 4 things maybe about where we're at the moment. The first is this: many leaders are experiencing 3 common responses, what we might call common responses at this time. And of course, there are plenty of other ones you might be experiencing, but these ones are the ones we hear coming up again and again and again in conversation with others. The first is this: anxiety. The rise of anxiety continues, and whether that's at an institutional level or at a community level, or whether it's at a personal level, anxiety is all around. And of course, at a personal level, it may be that as leaders ourselves, we're struggling with internal anxiety. There was a recent survey of pastors that was done that highlighted the fact that 1 in 5 church leaders at the moment says that their own emotional well-being is below average or poor. And so there are some struggles there for those of us who may be in leadership around this issue of anxiety. The second common response we're experiencing amongst those we lead with is anger. Leaders can become the lightning rod for the struggles and frustrations that people are experiencing in other areas of their life. And that can be made worse by the fact that distance desensitizes people and leads people to be a bit more aggressive or ruder even online than they would be in person. One church leader wrote a blog that I read last week: "Why is everyone mad at you right now?" And certainly as I've spoken to church leaders, many are experiencing that reality of actually lots of people expressing their anger to them as leaders. And the third common response people are experiencing is what we've called acedia. Now that's difficult to translate. It's an ancient word, but it's a word which really is about spiritual listlessness. It's more than apathy, but it has some similarities with apathy. And again, I was talking to a church leader last week who was saying how hard it was to get previously active congregation members to engage and do things at the moment. There's a sense of spiritual listlessness around. So here we are, acedia. The temptation, I guess, in these things is to be drawn into responding like with like, anxiety with anxiety, anger with anger, acedia with acedia, rather than responding with compassion, calm, and courage. We've put a whole bunch of resources together to help you if you want to explore a little bit further that on a resources sheet that we will send to you following this particular webinar. But that's one area that we're hearing again and again. Here's the second. Engaging young people is proving to be difficult. I was talking to an experienced youth worker who oversees a network of youth workers, and he was telling me that every single youth worker he speaks to at the moment is really struggling to keep young people engaged. And he mentioned a whole variety of reasons as to why that might be. But it can be a real struggle. Lots of young people seem to be disengaging from online events and gatherings that are being put on for them by churches. And the reason why I mentioned that is if you're experiencing that, you're not on your own. Others are experiencing it as well. The youth worker went on to say that some youth workers, those working with young people, paid or not, are actually experiencing something of a crisis of confidence. Can we actually do this? And I guess the temptation here is to criticize our youth people for not doing a good job or for what they're not achieving, rather than what they need at the moment is our encouragement, our thanks, and our blessing. Wouldn't it be wonderful that if every person in any church around the country that's connected to this webinar who's involved in helping run something for young people got a text, an email, a letter through the door, a present on the door to say, thank you for all you're doing. We know it's hard at the moment. Here's the third thing that we're picking up consistently from leaders around the country. Leaders are in a variety of places. Now, you may know we've been tracking how leaders are doing since March, and inevitably there are those ups and downs that we are all experiencing in what are not just uncertain times, but are unstable times as well. So we're just going to cancel the screen save for a moment, and we're going to offer a poll. And the poll is the one we've been doing. Here it is, 10 words to choose from. Which word most resonates with you at this time? It's the last time we're going to use these 10 words, because actually it's time for a different set of 10 words as we go into the new year. But just click on one which most resonates with you and then submit. And then I'll reveal the results of the poll as to where we are as a group this afternoon. That's great. That's about 45% of you. And 76%. I apologize to those of you who can't do it. Some devices don't allow it to happen. And just about finished. And we're going to end the poll now. And let me share the results with you. Where are we at as a group this afternoon? Interesting, 23% of us are in that exhausted category, 18% in the frustrated, 14% in the overwhelmed. And fascinatingly, the last 2 months we've done this, exhausted has consistently been the highest one out of all those others. Earlier in COVID, energized, excited were much higher. It does seem that we're in all sorts of different places. And if only it was as simple as being in one place. The reality, of course, is that we're cycling between a variety of emotions and states of well-being, anger, frustration, excitement, concern, worry, a whole range of different things. Can I just offer a temptation that I think it's good for us to resist here? The temptation here to resist is of thinking it's easier for everyone else. The reality is it probably isn't. Many leaders are dealing with significant personal challenges behind their front doors, as well as the myriad of leadership challenges in their role. If we can have the slides back up, Pam. So let's be careful not to go down that temptation route. And here's the fourth thing that we're just beginning to see, aren't we? The fourth thing that we're picking up as we listen to what's going on, a glimmer of hope on the pandemic front in the form of a vaccine that might be on its way, a potential light at the end of the tunnel, although the pessimists will tell us it's a train coming our way. So how we engage with the future beyond Christmas could be something that we now need to give a little bit more attention to. And the temptation here is to be so caught up with the demands of the present that we give no attention to the possibilities of the future. Well, those are four things we've observed. And before we move on, we've noticed that, of course, the archbishops have called the church to pray in this season for our country. And we thought it would be good to pause to pray ourselves at this point. And Pam's just going to lead us briefly in some prayer for ourselves and some prayer for our country. Pam.
Folks, let's pray. We're going to pray first, yes, for each other. So the C of E guidelines suggest we're to respond to all that's going on with calm and courage and compassion. James has talked about that already. So let's pray these things for each other in the silence. Loving God, we give thanks for each other, and we pray that in these days of challenge, you will indeed enable us to be people who respond to all that's going around us with calmness, with courage, with compassion. Keep us close to you, that we may know your ways each day. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. And then we're going to use a prayer from the Thy Kingdom Come website. And there are 5 short prayers to pray, things to pray for, and I'll leave some silence for each one. Loving God, your Son, Jesus Christ, came that we might have life and have it abundantly. Pour out your blessing upon our nation. Where there is illness, bring your healing touch. Where there is fear, strengthen us with the knowledge of your presence. Where there is uncertainty, build us up in faith. Where there is dishonesty, lead us into truth. Where there is discord, may we know the harmony of your love. All these things we ask in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thanks, Pam. So to respond with calm, courage, and compassion, the one we're going to focus on just for the rest of our time is the courage one. And of course, when we focus on courage, we recognize that isn't the absence of fear, nor a sort of gung-ho recklessness, nor a naive denial of reality. But what we do mean by courage is a faith-filled commitment to discern what God might be doing through all of this, and a quiet determination to go his way, despite the cost. Why focus on courage? I was intrigued by this little quote from Stephen Croft, Bishop of Oxford, in a podcast he recently did. Fear is our unwelcome and sometimes unacknowledged companion in most situations of crisis. And of course, the reality is few of us are immune from the way that the emphasis on safety has permeated our culture with fear. It's also true that there are extraordinary opportunities before us as the church at the moment, and yet also difficult decisions that will have to be made, and people are going to be divided about opportunity and choice in terms of the way forward. What's been amazing is to see the courage that leaders have exercised over these past 7 or 8 months in the myriad different ways that we've engaged with the COVID season. Leaders who have visited the sick, buried the dead, comforted the grieving, released resources to provide for those in need, leaders who have led our churches into uncharted territories. And the next phase will continue to call from us courage. Courage to shape the future in a way that differs from the past. Courage to make some tough decisions about what to stop and what to start. Courage to continue to be agile and flexible and adaptable. And there is good news. And the good news, of course, is that throughout history, the followers of Jesus have found that it isn't primarily about how much courage they have. It's about receiving courage from God. So the first of my 3 little thoughts about courage is this: ask God for courage. We're going to need it if we're to lead well in this next season. I love the fact that in Daniel 6, God gave to Daniel courage to pray when he was commanded not to. In Acts chapter 4, we see the early disciples continuing to show and share the good news of Jesus with others when they were commanded not to. And in the letters that Paul writes to the churches, he encourages them by inviting them to find boldness in their relationship with God. God can give us courage which takes us beyond our own resources. I think of an occasion some while back where I faced a particularly difficult leadership situation, and I was full of fear, unsure what to do, knowing that any decision was likely to have big implications. And there were 2 or 3 who were leading with me in that situation, and I chose to be vulnerable and say, look, I am so concerned about this. I'm fearful. And one of the older leaders asked if they could pray for me. He placed a hand on my shoulder and literally prayed for God to give me courage. And I can't say this has happened very often, but it was literally as though I was filled with courage from God. It was an extraordinary experience. If we're lacking courage, let's start by asking God for it. The second thing we can do to lead with courage is to work on our courage. And the good news is that courage is something we can grow in. Researcher Brené Brown highlights that for us in all her research she's done around this issue. So here are 5 quick little things we can do to grow in courage. Firstly, we can engage in stretch, move out of our comfort zone, green zone, and into our red zone, where we're a little bit more uncomfortable, but nonetheless, it's the place of stretch, where a little courage will be needed. But if we exercise it, what was red then becomes green. Second thing we can do is to foster shared leadership. We're far more likely to be courageous with others around us. If you like, our COVID response team, the one or two other people who we're sharing this journey with. Just as when I lacked courage in that example I gave a moment ago, I could lean into other leaders I was sharing leadership with. Third little thing we can do is to nurture prudence. We're not called to be reckless. Common sense and divine wisdom are close cousins of helpful courage. And so we choose our battles wisely. We identify the right opportunity to go for. We're prudent in the way that we exercise courage. Fourth thing we can do is to build resilience. It's very difficult to be courageous when you're feeling tired and worn out. So just weighing up where you are at in terms of your capacity for exciting new possibilities or tough challenges can be helpful, and to know you may need to build a bit more resilience before you face that particular decision. The fifth thing we can do is take a step. Moving in the right direction builds momentum. So whilst it may be a big thing we're facing, can we break it down into smaller steps that just begin us on the journey and give us courage for the next step and the next step? And then eventually we find ourselves taking the full range of steps to where we're wanting to go. We can work on our courage as leaders. And here's the third thing we can do. We can perhaps take a few risks. There's been a lot of phrases bandied around during this COVID season, haven't there? We all know crises expose and accelerate, that disruption is the birthplace of innovation, that we're in a season of unexpected problems and unprecedented opportunities. We've all heard these phrases over these last few months, but the longer this goes on, the more likely we are to give up on the opportunities, not only to respond well to the immediate, but now to get involved in the reconstruction phase of how the future might be shaped. And it will require courage of us to keep people focused on the opportunity rather than on the problem, to keep people focused on the future rather than the past, to keep people focused on the quiet voice of the Spirit rather than the loud voices of the people. And therefore we might need to take a few risks. Where might the opportunities lie that require some risk? Well, here are four that I'm aware of. Reconfiguring of the lay and clergy roles. It just might be that one of the things we've been learning over the last 6 or 7 months is that we need to reconfigure the way that we engage lay and clergy in leadership. Secondly, the rethinking of why and how we gather. Our use of buildings and online. We may have to rethink that. Pam, do just press the button for the next bit, which is the rethinking of why and how we gather.
Sorry, it's frozen.
Oh, don't worry. Here's the third one. Re-engagement with the local and global. An imaginative engagement with our communities, with the small, may well be at the heart of what we're doing in the future. Yet also a compassionate engagement with the bigger issues of well, here are two that have come up during COVID, the environment and Black Lives Matter. Here's a fourth one to play with, the reframing of tradition and innovation, not as enemies, but as compatriots to help us proclaim afresh the gospel of Christ in every generation. There are four things where we might need courage to take a few risks. And we don't do this out of an angst-ridden, faithless desperation, nor ignoring the tough realities many people face, nor a reckless abandonment of common sense, but we do it out of a sense of calling, out of what God is calling us to be as his body, his church, in order that we might more faithfully fulfill his mission and ministry in this land in the future. And this will require courage. It's always possible, isn't it, to rationalize away with a whole bunch of reasons why making a courageous decision isn't a good thing to do. But it may just be that God is calling us now to follow him into some new places around, well, these, if not some other areas as well. One person said last week, courage is the thin place between failure and significant breakthrough. What are the significant breakthroughs that God has for us, but that might require some courage from us? Next slide, Pam. I wonder in your groups, you might like to explore in a moment when we go into them, what else helps build courage? But at this point, next slide, Pam. May the words spoken to Joshua as he took over from Moses and embarked on an uncharted journey into the promised land echo in our souls. May the Lord help us be strong and courageous, to be strong and very courageous as we lead his people. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go.
James, thank you so much. There's so much to think about and to reflect on there. So, folks, for 14 minutes, we're going to put you in breakout rooms to discuss those things. There will be some questions to reflect on in the chat, but you will need to reopen chat once you get into your breakout room in order to look at the questions. We suggest that you appoint someone just to steer the conversation and keep you on track, that you introduce yourselves to each other very briefly and then dive in. If you have questions that come out of your discussions, please note them down, and then when you come back, please put them in the chat for all of us for our Q&A session. So I hope you really enjoy those 14 minutes, and we'll see you back in a bit. Spot them, but okay, I think we've got nearly everybody back, James.
Great.
So let me ask you the question that we've got so far, which is about balancing courage between different things. So someone says, how do we balance courage to face the future with courage to follow where God is leading?
Thank you. I suppose my hope would be that the two would be similar, overlapping, that the future that we want to face is linked to what we believe God is calling, the future we want to shape is linked to what we believe God is calling us to. And I guess part of the leadership task, certainly as we go into the new year, will be to take time to discern what we think God is calling us to, how the church might need to shape itself for future mission and ministry in our land. And as we discern what he is wanting, and that will be at a local level, at a regional level, at a national, even at a global level, I think we're going to be doing that. As we discern what God might be calling us to, we will begin then to shape hopefully the life of the church around those things over the months and probably years to come. One of the things I think is really interesting, I heard somebody say last week, does God want to use this COVID pandemic as a game changer for the church? If he does, let's not miss out on the opportunity. And I think that's really what we're trying to grapple with, isn't it? What is God doing in and through all of this that might help us to be the church for the future?
Thank you, James. Let me just give you a follow-up question from that. Do you think the pandemic has helped the church to rethink and reimagine what it means to move in the dynamic power of the Holy Spirit? Are we being trained to exercise a muscle that needs exercising?
That's a great question. And my hunch is that there are actually a number of muscles that we are now exercising that we didn't exercise in the same way before the pandemic. And maybe one of them is sort of the nature of the work of the Spirit within us, amongst us and through us. And that would be a great muscle to be exercising. But there are other muscles as well that have been, that we've found. It's a bit like going to a gym, isn't it? Having a personal trainer who says, oh, look at this area, and suddenly you discover muscles in a new place. And there's a whole range of things the church is engaging with. And that's the exciting thing. Overall, I think the church has done incredibly well in the way we've responded, with creativity, with courage, with compassion, with an extraordinary level of commitment. And it's exciting to see all the good things that have been going on over these past months. I know, amidst all sorts of really challenging things as well.
James, one of the things someone has said about that we need courage for is the sense of responsibility for people's health. And that really interests me, because I know that people aren't always as good at keeping the rules as we would like them to be. And that's a very real and practical need for courage. In terms of not going back to how things were, because we believe God is leading us into new things, how can we do that saying no thing well?
Yes. Great question. Two things. It's always easier to say no if you have a bigger yes burning inside you. So part of it is about discerning what the bigger yes is. And that might be personally, individually, or it might be corporately as a community of the church gathered. What's the big yes God is calling us to? Because when we see that, it becomes easier to say, do you know what, if that's what we need to be doing, then maybe this is what we need to stop doing. So that's the first thought. The second thought is people will get on board with a no, find it easier, to get on board with a no if they've had a part to play in the shaping of what might be the yes. Involvement leads to ownership. So when we come to a place where we realize a no needs to be said, no, we're not going to do that any longer, or we're not going to return to doing that in this way. Actually, if people have been a part of that process, prayerfully engaged, thoughtfully engaged, then they are more likely to be on board. Now, it would be pie in the sky, wouldn't it, to suggest that everyone will be on board, and there will still be folks who, when they hear the no, will be angry and may respond with that anger we were talking about earlier on, disappointed, frustrated, disillusioned, absolutely. And sadly, that is just part of the leadership reality, that we will have those occasions where, despite all our best efforts, when we end up saying no to something, there will still be those who will not respond well to what we've said.
Thank you. James, a question about leading people into the future. While explaining things maybe to a PCC or a leadership team, how can we do that in a way that where we're not exploiting people who are not maybe paying full attention to what we're on? How do we avoid riding roughshod over people who've got so many things on their minds they're not scrutinizing or perhaps challenging us as they should?
Yes. So I think with something like this, the key is, if you think that might be happening, alert people. Let people know that actually this is a really important issue, and I really want to draw your attention to it. So as much as possible, they are getting good sight and taking time to make wise decisions over important things, the opportunities we want to embrace, or things, challenges we may need to face. I guess the other thing is, more often than not, if it's a big decision we're making with others, it's better to make it over several occasions rather than in one occasion, so that people have time to process, time to engage, time to think, time to pray. The bigger the issue, the more likely we'll make a wiser choice if we do it in a staged way rather than just in a moment. So those two things might help.
And then honing in on PCCs. What do we need to do in our PCCs differently from maybe how it's happening at the moment, so we can lead churches together and reshape the church?
I would use a simple framework to help you in your conversation, and there have been several that have been floating around that are helpful. We've produced a little one called a little matrix with 4 questions, because in essence, in order for the PCC to have a good conversation, it probably needs to be structured in a helpful way. So using a matrix, using a framework or a series of questions, or sometimes getting somebody in from outside, that can be another thing which might help to structure the conversation, so that actually, as a result of working through a good process, we can come to wise decisions. Often as leaders, part of our job is to think about the process as much as it is to push forward a particular angle, because a good process will help people come to good decisions.
Thank you, James. One of the things you talked about was that as this goes on, more people are getting angry, and often it's clergy who are on the receiving end of that anger. Sometimes it's individuals, sometimes it's a sort of collective anger that all focuses on the clergy or church leaders. What have you got anything you can sort of say to that to give us courage in those circumstances?
Yes, I think I would want to say this, that more often than not, the anger that we receive is not about us. It's related to other things in the individual's life. And if that is the case, it's about recognizing that it's not personal to you, it's actually to do with wider issues. Now, there are those occasions where it will be personal to us, and we need wisdom to discern what's going on. I've put together this little sort of resources sheet that we're going to post into the chat and we'll send to you. And one of the articles in there, which is really helpful, is about how to deal with others' anger well, with 5 very practical suggestions about what to do in order to respond to anger that might be coming our way. But overall, I think generally we're often, as I said in the talk, the lightning rods. We're the safe place that people feel able to explode with, even if it's nothing to do with us. They still express their anger. And so knowing that can sometimes help us to handle it a little bit better and to try and respond with calm rather than with anger.
Thank you, James. But then there's the thing about actually we need support, don't we, ourselves, when we've been on the receiving end of people's aggression or their anger. Have you got suggestions about ways to build support or networks for leaders, especially when they're working in small groups or fractured groups of churches? Have you got anything you can say to that?
Yes, I mean, I couldn't agree more that it's such an important time to have good friends to lean into. And if you, it may be that there's a local group of church leaders that you can be a part of, where you can find some support and encouragement and a place for prayer. It may be that you have friends around the country that you can connect with. I have a little group of 4 other people that I connect with, 3 other people rather, sorry, there's 4 of us in total, on a regular basis. And during COVID, we've been connecting more often. It's been such a helpful group to lean into during this time. It may be that there are some more official, that's not quite the right word, what am I looking for? Formal relationships you want to lean into. It may be a time to find a mentor or a coach or a work consultant, or for some of us, a counselor, or maybe it's a spiritual director, to actually find somebody who we journey with in a slightly more structured and formal way. And that might be helpful as a way of gaining support during a time like this. So whether it's on the informal or on the formal side, choosing to lean into important relationships to get the sort of support that is needed would be a very wise choice for any leader to make at the moment.
Thank you. And then thinking of other sources of support as we make difficult decisions going into the future, how do you think that senior leadership in the church are addressing these issues? Are they addressing them as well? Because we will need help to make difficult and courageous decisions into the future.
Yes, I was saying in the webinar this morning, my experience of talking to senior leaders over these past months is that I have yet to come across of one who doesn't know that there are just enormous decisions facing the church at the moment. And they are wrestling with big issues, complex issues. Now, there may be some senior leaders out there who are sort of naive and so disconnected that they're not aware of that, but I haven't come across one yet. So first of all, let's just be aware of how we might support them in some of the big and complex decisions they're trying to wrestle with. But I think the other thing we can do is to engage well with them and take an exploratory approach where we seek to explore things through asking good questions with them. We can ask questions, everything from what are some of the big issues that you see that we're facing as a church? What are the ways that you're thinking that we might both on a local and a regional level work together on these issues? And so asking good questions to engage in good conversation would be a good way forward, but also at times simply asking for support, asking for help. Contacting a senior leader and saying, I'm really struggling. I'd love you to be praying for me. I'd love it if I could have a conversation with you about this issue. And that's where this thing of appropriate vulnerability can be a help to us, finding ways to be appropriately vulnerable so that we gain some of the support and encouragement that we might need from those who have some oversight of us. So it's a two-way thing, isn't it? How can we support them and how can we gain their support? I guess the one thing that's least likely to gain their support is if we stand on the sideline and throw bricks at them. that's probably not going to be the most helpful way forward.
Thank you. If we can just think now about families and young people, should we be worried about what you said, that it's harder to engage young people in particular? And if we are worried, what can we do about it?
That's a great question, and I don't know the answer. Talking to the youth worker last week, he was saying that there is a lot of anxiety amongst young people working with young people about this. Will we regain them back or not? And I don't think anybody actually knows the answer. What is happening at the moment is there's some good thinking going on about why this might be the case and some ideas about what might need to be done. One little clue about why it may be the case is that it may be related to a bigger and deeper issue around our approach to youth work pre-COVID, not just what's been happening during COVID. And if you like, as often in a crisis, COVID has accelerated something that was already there before. So my encouragement would be at this stage, gather those who are working with young people, ask good questions so that you can have open and honest conversations, explore what the issues might be, and see if you can get on the solution side of the problem and find one or two small things that we might do that both encourages the folks working with young people, but also helps us to connect a little better in this next year with those who are young themselves.
Okay, let's see if we can squeeze in one more question. Someone has said, is there something about pausing to take stock of who's still in the church, who's left, and who may have joined us? Someone else has pointed out that just because people have stopped turning up doesn't necessarily mean they think they've left.
Yes, that's a very helpful reminder, and thank you for that. Yes, I think it's always good to pause to take stock. If you've not caught hold of the way we use that little acronym PAUSE in a previous webinar, do go onto the website and have a look at that webinar where we talk about how to pause well. It is one of the critical things leaders do, isn't it? We stop to think and to pray. And the danger, as all of us know, is in all the busyness of responding to what's going on, that we stop making time to think and to pray. And so in that little pause acronym, we were suggesting some simple ways to make sure that we are pausing to pray. Here's one suggestion I've got. I think it would be a really good time now to look at January and put a day in the diary to pause to think and pray, to take stock. What's gone on in 2020? Where are we at the start of 2021? And what might God be leading us to? And if you can do that as a leader, then actually you'll be serving your people well, because you'll be doing one of the things that leaders need to do, taking time out to pause, to pray, and to think. And if you can do that with one or two others, then that might be a really good process. So you're thinking and praying together about where are we now, and what might God be calling to us to in the future.
Thank you, James. Folks, we're coming up to the end of our hour together, but just a few things to say. James and I will stay here for another 20 minutes or so if you would like to continue asking questions. And James has got particularly 5 tips for Christmas that he will give in the first bit after we officially finish. Thank you so much for coming and being with us. The dates for our next webinars are in January on the 20th and 21st, and bookings for those will be open soon. Thank you to all of those, particularly who made a donation for today's webinar. It does help us to keep providing them. And as always, it would really help us if you would fill in a feedback form so that we'll know how we're getting on. There's a link coming up in the chat or in the email that we will send you tomorrow. So let's pray to finish our time together. But as I said before, we will be around for another 20 minutes or so. But let's pray. Loving God, we thank you for all we have discussed and learned and acknowledged and rejoiced in and prayed. We give to you the rest of this day and the weeks ahead, asking for your guidance and your courage. Send us out in the power of your Spirit to live and work to your praise and glory. In the name of Christ. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Lovely to see you. If you need to go, please do. Thanks so much for joining us. And for those who are able to stay around, Pam, shall we dive straight on?
Yes, would you like to tell us your 5 tips for Christmas, please, James?
Yeah, I was just pondering, and there is so much stuff around at the moment which is so helpful on Advent and Christmas. But here are 5 things that I just quickly jotted down that I thought might be helpful. Top tip number 1, amongst all the possibilities, choose to do 1 or 2 things and do them well. I think the danger is one looks around and see all this stuff and think, oh, goodness me, where do I start? Well, just choose to do 1 thing or 2 things and do them well. Don't overstress yourselves in what is already a stressful season. Top tip number 2, if at all possible, get a Christmas response team together. Don't just do this on your own. Find 1 or 2 others who can join you and help you in the planning and preparing for Christmas. That'll take a little bit of the load off you. I know this isn't going to be possible for everyone, but if at all possible, try to do that, because I think for most of us, we'll find it much, much more fun to plan our Christmas and plot our way through Christmas with others. Top tip number 3, encourage our people to invite and connect. I say invite, the Church of England is saying inform, and they may well be right in their Comfort and Joy campaign, but I've chosen to still go with invite. And the reason I've said that is because I think this Christmas people are looking for somewhere and are looking for a way to celebrate. And we could find this is one of the most significant opportunities we've had in decades for getting people to join us in celebrating Christmas with us. And part of that is about letting people know what we're doing. So being positive and proactive in the inviting. And there's all sorts of resources that are available, and I'll point you to some in just a moment to help with that. Connect. Fascinating that this morning the Office for National Statistics identified that 4.2 million people are saying that they're feeling lonely. Christmas is always a lonely time for some. And the Office for National Statistics are telling us that this is the highest record of loneliness through this COVID period that they've registered. And that interestingly, most of those folks are not, as we might be tempted to think, the elderly. It's actually amongst the younger people that this loneliness is being recorded. So wouldn't it be great if as a church we found creative ways to connect and to encourage our people to connect? If, for example, there's somebody who's not bubbled with anyone else, is there a lonely person one could bubble with over Christmas and invite them to be a part of our celebrations? On our streets, are there creative ways we can encourage our people to do small things that connect in those who are going to be lonely this Christmas? So number 3, invite people to encourage people to invite and connect. Number 4, engage people online, move them from being observers to participants. And the reason I say that is we all know that when we're online, it's really easy to be distracted and to be doing other things. So everything we can do to engage them will actually, I think, enable the experience of whatever we're offering online to be better. Invite them to watch something, read something, do something, scan a QR code, invite them to find something. Invite them to use the chat facility in response to some Christmas quiz questions. Do anything that actually moves them from just observing to participating, and we'll, I think, have a richer experience together. And then lastly, share things around churches in an area. We can't probably do everything that needs to be done or might be helpful to do. But if you're in a place where there are other churches, maybe together we can share out some stuff and do things really well, so that we don't feel that we've got to do everything. I think this is the time for us to be the church, not just a church, and where it's possible, share with others so that different things are offered by different churches that engage our communities well. And if you've not yet come across it, and I'm hoping now my share screen might work because earlier on it wouldn't, let me just show you this Padlet board here. There's a link going into the chat now. This is a board that we've created. Can you see that, Pam?
Yes.
Great. This is a board that we've created with all sorts of ideas and resources for Christingle, crib services, carol services, other ideas, caring acts, videos to use. There's a whole range of different stuff on here, all sorts of different interesting things you can link through to. Grab yourself a cup of coffee, take half an hour, have a look through, see if there's one or two things that might be helpful to you. And if you've not yet signed up to the Church, COVID and Christmas Facebook group, there are 3,500 people on that Facebook group currently sharing best practice, ideas and resources. And the creativity on there is amazing. There's so many helpful things for Advent and Christmas. So you might want to sign up to that Facebook group, Church, COVID and Christmas, or something like that, I think it's called. It's a really helpful group to be a part of.
If you could stop the screen share so we can, or as many of us can see each other, that would be great. James, one person has said that one of the things they're doing to stay in touch with their young people has just been to post them letters.
Yes.
And invite them to respond. And I'm just thinking how glorious it is that lots of grandparents have been learning to communicate like the kids have been doing for years. And maybe some of the teenagers and young people are learning to communicate like their grandparents used to. So
great, Pam, love it.
Good thought, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I've come to the end of the questions. If I've missed something that you really want asked, please could you just put it back in the chat at the bottom and then I'll spot it. Are there any other questions? Please, again, put them in the chat.
Or folks could unmute and ask if that was easier.
They could. If you want to be bold and unmute and then ask a question, please do. It's all gone very quiet.
Just to say thank you for a lovely session, really helpful. Lovely to see you and see everyone else. Thanks.
Thanks, Joe. Lovely to see you.
Thank you.
Anybody else got any questions?
Will there be any resources or notes from this session that we can tap into? I've been trying to write copious notes and things, so I just wonder if there's anything.
Yes, so two things we're offering. There's the handout that we produced and sent with the email, a link to yesterday, and we will relink in the email we'll send to you tomorrow. And then we've also produced this resource sheet full of all sorts of practical tools that might help you around some of the things that we've been talking about today. That has been posted in the chat, and we will also send it to you again tomorrow via the email. So do take a look at this. It links through to a variety of things that we hope you'll find helpful, following up the material we've been covering today.
James, just before we go, there is one more question I'd like to ask, which was one that came from this morning's webinar that I think it's worth us considering. Someone asked, where are the prophetic voices speaking us into this situation?
Yeah, great question. We were reflecting a bit on this morning because if we are moving into what's called the reconstruction phase at some point in 2021, if that glimmer of light does become a reality, then listening to the prophets at the moment, the ones who can speak into the situation, is a good thing to be doing. I, off the top of my head, just listed a few of those that I've been listening to, but please share yours in the chat. Here are some of the ones that I've been listening to. Mark Sayer in Australia is always worth a listen. I think he's a prophet who's speaking really interesting things into our current situation. Kerry Newhoff in Canada, and also Danielle Strickland in Canada. Both are saying really interesting things. You won't agree with them all, but that's the nature of a prophet, isn't it? That they bring challenging things, some of which we'll agree with, some of which we won't. I think John Mark Comer in the States is worth listening to at this time. Here in this country, I've been trying to tap into a few theologians who I think have got good things to say. I'm always going to listen to stuff that Tom Wright is saying. I find him stimulating. Ian Paul has been writing some interesting stuff. There are a number of people who blog, people like Jules Middleton and others who are just constantly reflecting on what's currently going on. Those are some of the folks that I would be looking to sort of connect with and listen to. There are plenty of others out there. And as I say, if you've got particular ones you're finding interesting and helpful, somebody mentioned Carl Beach this morning, do pop them in the chat. Good to be listening to a few of those voices and what they might offer us as we try to discern how we might shape the church for future mission and ministry in 2021 and 22 and beyond.
John Mark, who did you say?
Comer, C-O-M-E-R, John Mark Comer. His latest book was called Ruthless Elimination of a Hurry, which was a prophetic book in itself about how to live life slightly differently in a hurry-sick world. But he's been speaking and writing a little bit on the COVID situation as well, and is really worth listening to. He's based in Portland in Oregon.
James, someone has just asked you to repeat the 5th tip for Christmas. You've got...
The 5th tip was share things around churches in your area. Don't think you've got to do everything yourself.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Anybody else? Okay, well, I think probably then it's time to draw stumps. Thank you so much for joining us. We look forward to seeing you again in January. We hope and pray that Advent and Christmas is a time of great blessing, and pray for you as you plan towards the new year. Thank you so much for coming. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye
you.
for now.
Thank you very much.